There was a night when Naomi sat on the edge of her bathtub at 2 in the morning, phone in her hand, scrolling through nothing in particular, because the silence in her apartment had become too loud to sit inside or without some kind of noise to drown it out. The water in the sink was still running from when she had splashed her face 20 minutes earlier, trying to wake herself out of a spiral that had started somewhere around midnight and had not let go since. Her chest felt tight. Her thoughts kept circling the same 4 or 5 fears, picking them up, turning them over, setting them down, picking them up again, like a person rearranging furniture in a room that was never going to feel right no matter where the couch went. You know this feeling. Maybe you are in it right now. Maybe it is not 2 in the morning for you. Maybe it is 2 in the afternoon, and you are sitting in a parking lot before you go into a building you do not want to walk into. Or maybe it is right now, reading these words, because something in your life is cracked open and you do not know how to hold all the pieces. I want you to stay with me, because what I am about to tell you is not a strategy for managing your chaos. It is an inheritance you have already been given, and most of us have been living like beggars in a house we already own. Naomi's mother used to tell her a story about a fisherman who lived on the edge of a lake that was famous for storms. The storms there were not gentle. They came up out of nowhere, the way grief does, the way a diagnosis does, the way a phone call at the wrong hour does. One afternoon, a teacher and his students were crossing that very lake in a small boat, and the teacher fell asleep in the back, his head resting against a cushion, completely undisturbed by the rocking of the boat. While he slept, the sky changed. The wind picked up. The water that had been calm only an hour before began to heave and swell, and waves started crashing over the sides of the boat, soaking the men inside, filling the hull with water faster than they could bail it out. These were not soft men. Several of them had spent their whole lives on that lake. They knew boats. They knew storms. And still, this storm terrified them, because it was bigger than their experience, bigger than their skill, bigger than anything they had a category for. They shook the sleeping teacher awake, panic in their voices, asking him if he even cared that they were about to die. He stood up. He did not bail water. He did not grab an oar. He looked at the wind and the waves the way you might look at a dog that was barking too loudly in your own living room. And he simply said, "Peace, be still." And the wind stopped, not gradually, not the way storms naturally taper off over an hour. Immediately, the water went flat. The boat stopped rocking. And in the silence that followed, the men in that boat were more afraid of him than they had been of the storm, because they realized they were in the presence of something that had authority over chaos itself. I tell you that story not because I want you to picture a boat or a lake, but because I want you to understand something about what peace actually is. Peace was never the absence of wind. Peace was a person standing in the middle of the wind, completely undisturbed, because he carried something inside himself that the storm had no power over. And here's a part that changes everything for you. Tonight, wherever you are reading this, that same peace, the very same authority that silenced a storm with 2 words, lives in you. Not beside you, not somewhere far off, waiting for you to earn your way to it. In you. This is what I mean when I say, don't skip, my child. The world offers distraction, but I offer something far greater. Peace that guards your mind from the inside out. Think about what the world actually offers you when your chest gets tight and your thoughts start spinning. It offers you distraction. It offers you a feed to scroll, a show to binge, a drink to pour, a project to throw yourself into so you don't have to feel what you're feeling. None of those things are peace. They are anesthesia. They numb the nerve ending for a little while. But the moment the screen goes dark or the noise stops, the storm is still there, waiting for you, exactly where you left it, sometimes worse because you ignore it instead of facing it. Distraction asks nothing of you but your attention, and it gives you nothing back but a temporary fog. Peace is different. Peace does not ask you to forget your problem. Peace asks you to bring your problem into the presence of the one who already has authority over it. Naomi did not know any of this tonight. She sat on the edge of that bathtub. What she knew was that she had been let go from her job 3 weeks earlier, a job she had held for 6 years, a job that had become part of her identity in ways she didn't fully understand until it was gone. She knew that her savings would carry her for maybe 4 months if she was careful. She knew that her mother had been asking pointed questions about what's next in a tone that sounded like worry dressed up as curiosity. She knew that every time she closed her eyes to sleep, her mind ran calculations: rent, groceries, health insurance, the slow shrinking math of survival. And those calculations kept her awake long past the hour when sleep should have come easily. What she did not know, not yet, was that there's a kind of peace that has nothing to do with her bank account. A peace that does not wait for the circumstances to resolve before it shows up. A peace that the world cannot offer because the world's peace is always conditional. Peace that the job comes back. Peace that the diagnosis is good news. Peace that the relationship heals. Peace that the bills get paid. Conditional peace is not really peace at all. It's relief. And relief only lasts as long as the conditions hold. The moment one domino falls, the whole conditional peace collapses with it, because it was never built on anything solid. It was built on circumstances, and circumstances are the least stable foundation a person can build a life on. This is why I say to you, you do not have to manufacture calm in the middle of chaos. You simply have to receive mine. Notice the difference between manufacturing and receiving. Manufacturing is exhausting. It requires raw materials you may not have. It requires energy you may not have left. There's an old letter, written by a man who knew what it meant to have every reason in the world to be anxious. He wrote it from inside a prison cell, chained to a guard, uncertain whether he would live or die, and in that letter, he said something almost impossible to believe given his circumstances. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds. Read that again, slowly. He did not say the peace of God will solve all your problems. He did not say the peace of God will get you out of prison. He said it will guard your heart and your mind. It functions like a soldier standing at the gate of your inner life, refusing entry to every thought that tries to march in and convince you that you are alone, that you are finished, that there is no way through this. The peace does not deny the storm exists outside the gate. It simply refuses to let the storm dictate what happens inside. This is the part Naomi began to understand around 3 a.m, when she finally put her phone down on a bathroom tile and let herself cry. Not the controlled, presentable kind of crying she did in front of other people, but the kind that comes up from somewhere underneath the ribs, raw and unguarded. And in the middle of that crying, something shifted. She wasn't trying to stop the tears. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She simply said out loud to an empty bathroom, "I don't know how to do this." And in the quiet that followed those words, something settled over her that she could not explain with language, something that did not change a single fact about her unemployment or her dwindling savings account, but changed the way those facts sat inside her chest. The tightness loosened, not because the problem got smaller, but because she suddenly felt the unmistakable sense that she was not facing it by herself. That is what peace that passes understanding means. It passes understanding because it does not make logical sense given the circumstances. A person should be anxious when they lose their income. A person should be anxious when the doctor uses words like, "We need to run more tests." A person should be anxious when the relationship they built their future around falls apart in a single conversation. By every reasonable measure, anxiety is the appropriate response to those situations. And yet there is a peace available in those very moments that defies the math, that walks directly against the logic of the circumstances, that settles into a person's chest and says, "You're still going to be okay, not because I am promising you the outcome you want, but because I am promising you my presence regardless of the outcome." That is a peace the world cannot manufacture, because the world only knows how to offer peace tied to outcomes. This peace is tied to a person, and that person does not change no matter what the outcome turns out to be. I want to tell you about another moment. This one belonging to a man named David, long before he was a king, back when he was a teenager standing in a valley across from a giant who had been terrorizing an entire army for 40 days. Every trained soldier in that army, men twice his size, men with armor and years of battle experience, stood frozen on their side of the valley, paralyzed by fear because the size of the threat had convinced them that the threat was bigger than anything they had access to. David walked into that valley with 5 stones and a sling, and what he said before that fight is worth sitting with. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord." Notice he did not say, "I come against you with more strength than you," or "I come against you because I am braver than these other men. He said, I come against you in the name of someone whose authority is not limited by the size of the problem in front of me. That same posture is available to you tonight. Whatever giant is standing across the valley from you right now, a diagnosis, a financial collapse, a marriage on the edge, a child who has wandered far from everything you taught them, a grief you have not finished grieving. The size of that giant does not determine the size of the peace available to you, because the peace was never sized according to your problem. It was sized according to the one offering it. Naomi went back to bed that night, not because everything was suddenly resolved, but because something inside her had stopped fighting. She actually slept, for the first time in nearly 3 weeks. And when she woke up the next morning, the job was still gone. The bank account was still the same number it had been the night before. Nothing about her external circumstances had changed even slightly. But she woke up different. She woke up with a strange, settled clarity that she could not fully explain to her mother when she called later that day, a clarity that allowed her to say, I don't know exactly how this is going to work out, but I think it's going to be okay, and mean it, not as wishful thinking, but as something closer to knowledge. This is the inheritance I am talking about. An inheritance is not something you earn. You do not work a certain number of hours to qualify for an inheritance. You do not perform well enough, pray hard enough, or have enough faith measured on some invisible scale to unlock it. An inheritance is something given to you because of whose child you are, not because of what you have done. If you've ever felt like peace was something other people seem to access easily while you have to fight for every scrap of calm you get, I want you to hear this clearly. Peace was never meant to be fought for. It was meant to be received the way a child receives a gift from a parent who delights in giving it, without negotiation, without proving worthiness, without first cleaning yourself up enough to deserve it. Think about how a small child receives things. A toddler does not examine whether they have been good enough that day before reaching out their hands for the thing their parent is offering them. They simply reach because some deep instinct in them trusts that the hand offering the gift is a hand that loves them. Somewhere along the way, most of us lost that instinct. We grew up and started believing that love and peace had to be earned through performance, through getting it right, through never failing, never doubting, never falling apart in the bathroom at 2 a.m. But that is not how this works. The peace being offered to you tonight does not wait for you to get your act together first. It meets you exactly where you are, in the parking lot, in the hospital waiting room, in the apartment that suddenly feels too quiet, in the middle of the argument you don't know how to repair. And it says, you do not have to wait. You can receive this right now, in the middle of the mess, not after the mess is cleaned up. There is a difference between peace as a feeling and peace as a gift, and this distinction matters more than it might seem at first. Feelings are notoriously unreliable. They rise and fall with sleep quality, with hormones, with whether your coffee kicked in, with whether the email you've been dreading finally arrived. If you wait to feel peaceful before you believe peace is available to you, you may wait a very long time, because feelings are reactive. They respond to what is happening around you. But a gift is different. A gift, once given, belongs to you whether you feel its weight in your hands or not. If someone gave you a house, the house would be yours on the day of the gift regardless of whether you happen to feel grateful that particular morning. The deed does not depend on your emotional state. Peace works the same way. It has already been given. It is sitting there, deeded to you, regardless of whether your nervous system has caught up to that reality yet on any given day. This means you do not have to chase a feeling in order to walk in peace. You simply have to recognize what has already been placed in your hands. Chasing is exhausting because the thing you are chasing keeps moving. Every time you almost catch up to calm, something new disrupts it, and you have to start the chase over again. Receiving requires no chase at all. It requires stillness. It requires the willingness to stop running after a feeling, and instead simply acknowledge a fact. This peace is already mine. I do not have to go find it. I only have to stop refusing it. I think about all the nights people spend like Naomi spent hers, sitting on the edge of something, a bathtub, a bed, a couch in a living room that feels too big and too empty, turn their fears over and over like stones in their hands, looking for the angle that will finally make the fear make sense, finally give it a shape they can manage. And I think about how much of that turning could be exchanged for stillness, not because the fear isn't real, Not because the circumstances aren't genuinely difficult, but because there is a peace available in the very center of the storm that does not require the storm to end first. The wind does not have to die down before the calm can begin. The calm can begin in the boat while the wind is still howling outside it, because the calm was never dependent on the weather. It was dependent on who was in the boat with you. There's a moment, right before sleep, when most people's minds are the loudest. The day's distractions have run out. There is no more scrolling to numb the ache, no more conversation to keep the thoughts at bay, no more tasks to throw yourself into. It is just you and the dark, and whatever you've been avoiding all day finally gets its chance to speak. For many people, this is the most dangerous hour, because it is the hour when anxiety finally gets a clear shot. But I want to suggest to you that this hour can become something else entirely. It can become the hour when you finally stop performing calm and start receiving it. It can become the hour when you say, out loud if you need to, I don't know how to do this, but I'm not doing it alone. And let that sentence settle into your chest the way Naomi let her tears settle into hers. Peace that passes understanding does not mean peace that makes no sense at all, like some kind of magic trick performed on your emotions. It means peace that operates by a different logic than the logic of your circumstances. Your circumstances say, you lost your job, therefore you should be anxious. Your circumstances say, the test results were not what you hoped, therefore you should be afraid. Your circumstances say, the relationship ended, therefore your future is uncertain, and uncertainty should terrify you. That logic is not wrong. Exactly. It is simply incomplete, because it leaves out the variable that changes everything. The presence of someone who is not limited by your circumstances, someone who was not surprised by the job loss, was not caught off guard by the diagnosis, did not lose track of you when the relationship ended. When that presence enters the equation, the math changes, even though nothing about the circumstances themselves has changed yet. This is why the peace passes understanding, because anyone doing the math without accounting for that presence will never arrive at the same answer. I think about the fisherman's boat again, and I think about how the disciples' fear did not come from nothing. The storm was real. The waves really were crashing over the sides. The boat really was at risk of sinking. Their fear was a rational response to a genuinely dangerous situation. And yet the teacher slept through it, undisturbed, not because he was naive about the danger, but because he knew something about his own authority that the storm could not override. When he stood up and spoke peace over the chaos, he was not denying that the storm had been real. He was simply demonstrating that the storm was not, in fact, the most powerful thing in that boat. You are not the most powerful thing in your storm either, but neither is the storm. There is a presence available to you that outranks every wave currently crashing over the side of your life, and that presence is not asleep, even when it feels like it. It is fully aware, fully present, fully capable of standing up at exactly the right moment and speaking 3 words over whatever is threatening to capsize you.